Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Art During the Quarantine. It is day 15. We made it. If you are in Spain, we just started our second round of quarantine. But I think there is something to celebrate because we've made it this far. So let's do that with a little bit of art today. Let me pray and we'll start it off. God, thanks so much that you're good to us. Thank you that there's always something to celebrate when we look at your face, God, because you're faithful and you're good to us. Even when things are going crazy, you're still good to us. Thank you, God. We give you this time, we give you this day, and we give you our attention. It is in Jesus' sweet name that I pray. Amen. Awesome. Well, we are going to jump right in here. Let me show you a little bit of what we're doing today. We are going to kick off this project by grabbing the resources that we need. Here is a little sample of what is to come. So that's really exciting. And let's get our resources. So you're going to need a piece of blank paper. If you happen to have watercolor paper on you or in your house, this is a good time to whip out that little notepad. I don't. So we're going to have a little more wrinkle than we would like in this paper, but that doesn't mean we can't watercolor. Grab a roll of tape. You're going to need a watercolor set. I'm grabbing a black pen and a pencil to sort of help myself later in the process. And you're going to need a paintbrush. I recommend one with a flat top, but if you don't have one like that, a rounded top will be fine. We'll just make a couple modifications. So let's start it off. Every good piece of artwork is a good border. So we are going to grab our tape. Let's create a rectangle space on the center of our paper so that we have kind of a defined area that we're going to watercolor. So I'm going to put down some tape. Let me show you what I'm doing here. So I put down a blank piece of tape right here. We're going to grab another one. And we're going to put these two parallel to each other to kind of create, they're not perfectly straight, but they're close. Let's see, how did I do? Upside down? Not bad. Okay, we've got two pieces of tape on there. Now we're going to grab two more. I'm going to put these perpendicular to those that I already have, crossing right over and then making sure I'm especially sealing this really center, the most inward part of the tape to be sure that border I have is going to be nice and crisp. Okay, grabbing this last piece here. Looking good. All right. So if you're just catching up with us, here we are. We've got this nice border attached. All of that. Sweet. Now here comes the fun step. I like this step a lot because it's a time to kind of play and be free. But basically what you're going to do is grab that jar of water that you have and you're going to grab the biggest paintbrush you have and essentially paint this entire middle surface, this rectangle that we have with water. So we're going to saturate the paper. This way, when we start using pigment with our watercolors, it has a really nice sort of place to land, if you will. Spilled a little bit on my table. We'll pick it up here. Okay. So here we go. This. Again, I'm just getting this whole paper nice and wet, trying to keep it even. Being sure I get all the way into those corners. Okay, we're looking really good. I'm gonna even it out there. So we've got this entire paper coated with water. Now, on what break was it? I think on the last school break I had in the first semester, I think it was Thanksgiving break, I went to the Canary Islands, which was such a gift. But this painting was kind of inspired by some of that coloring because they have these beautiful volcanic beaches that are black, and then their water is just gorgeous blue. So we're going to create a painting similar to that today, and I'll show you kind of how to divide up your paper. Let's start with this middle blue pigment here. Okay. So I'm going to face this towards you and we'll get started here. So I'm going to grab out my palette that has blue on it and I'm going to dip my brush and kind of saturate and activate that paint. I'm going to start about a third with 1/3 of the paper above, I'm going to take this bottom 2/3 and I'm going to slowly draw painted lines across like this, working my way down towards the bottom into a gradient. I'm going to work, see I'm working this pigment into the water that's already there. And again, making sure you get all the way to those edges. Need a little bit more water to receive it down here. I want it a little bit darker up here, so I'm going to continue at the top. Okay. Awesome. Keep working it down into the bottom of your paper. I'm realizing I need a little more water down there, so we'll keep spreading it down. Again, making sure it's kind of just a boundary, and we're going to create a gradient from the very top of this paper all the way to the very bottom. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. Now, while this is wet, I have a darker indigo, sort of cobalt color here. I'm gonna take this one, swish around just a little bit with my brush, not completely like sopping wet, but just kind of tapping. I'm gonna take this blue and slowly start working into these top couple layers. Again, kind of assimilating it downwards into your gradient here. The nice thing about this is that as our eyes move towards the horizon line, which is what we're creating, often pigments and waves, they look different. So adding this other color blue kind of adds a little bit more of a, it's a little more believable, I think. And adds kind of a depth to that ocean when you think about those ocean blues. So we'll work this down into the paper. I'm gonna continue this gradient and slowly taper off. I almost want it to go down a little bit more, so I'm gonna tip this, my brush back into this blue. Again, continuing that gradient and working our way down. Now, if I had watercolor paper, my paper would not be wrinkling like this. It would be able to handle the moisture that I have. Here's what I have so far. I see I have kind of a band in the middle, so I'm gonna grab a little water on my brush, and I'm just gonna slowly keep working these pigments together. I really want them to be friends. The key to this is just a lot of patience. So here we are, this is looking really good. I'm gonna let these colors and pigments kind of set into my paper, and I'm gonna spend a little bit of time up here on the very top of my horizon line. I'm gonna leave a little bit of margin in between these two because I don't want the colors to mix. So clean off your brush. We're gonna go right into this really nice deep blue, and I'm gonna saturate that paint completely this time. And I'm gonna slowly, oh, this is a little bit too dry. I'm gonna grab another brush and make sure the top of your paper isn't totally dry yet. Add a little bit more water. Mine is drying quicker than earlier today. I wonder if something in the air changed. So get the top of that paper saturated again. Grab your brush, dip it into that deeper blue, and we're gonna slowly kind of work this pigment up on the top of your paper, again with the gradient going downward towards the horizon line. If you're thinking, ooh, that blue is too dark, that's okay. We're gonna do a technique in a minute to kind of add a little bit of variety to the top of your paper. So you're all good. The nice thing about having the paper already wet is that these the paint really just kind of gels into the surface and doesn't really fight you that much. I really love that about watercolors. Doing this project was a good challenge for me because I'm not typically a painter, but it's a great time to try, so why not? I'm kind of getting close to this horizon line. I'm gonna grab a little bit of water on my brush and slowly just start helping this gradient kind of agree with itself a little bit more. Okay, so I'm really happy with that. So this is what we have so far. I'm not lifted up too far because I don't want the colors to blend, but here's what I have so far. Great. So as of now, I need to let this set for just a moment, but we can do something while it sets, which is great. Grab a Kleenex or a tissue near you, and I'd like you kind of to ball it up like this. we're going to create the illusion of some clouds on the very top of our skyline here. If you notice in my example, there's just the illusion of clouds, but I didn't actually paint clouds in. Throughout the layers that I applied on this watercolor, I blotted in between to kind of create the illusion of a gradient and clouds. And that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to kind of blot this like a blotter, and I'm going to just kind of create some random shapes on the top here. And look at the paint that's coming off. It's looking really good. I kind of did sort of an arc. You can do it however you'd like. There's what I have. Great. So I will slowly start kind of just blowing on my paper because it's pretty wet here. But we are going to slowly dip, clean off that brush with blue in the meantime, let that just soak off for just a moment, and get prepared to head into darker territories because we are going to start creating some of those black rocks that you saw at the very bottom of my painting. You'll get to see them when we draw them in just a second. So we'll get these sort of just gently give it a little bit of air. If you have a hairdryer on you, you could also do that. Especially down here is where we really don't want the colors to bleed, because that's going to be our bottom border. Painting it in reverse so you can see everything first. All right. Again, a nice way to kind of tell if it's ready is if the bottom of your paper is not moist. Mine still is a little bit, so we'll keep kind of waving it on here. Awesome. So what I can do in the meantime, I'm not going to be touching this horizon for a little bit, but I do know off the bat that I do want some deeper tones up here. So while I'm waiting for this bottom part to dry, grab that brush, the flat brush. I'm getting the wrong one. Great. Let's go back into that deeper blue, the lighter blue, and we'll layer on top. You can intensify the color without having to do too much work. And again, remember that we blended a little bit of this darker blue in while we were doing that. So I'm going to blend them together and be sure to let the darkest tones go closest to the horizon. Okay. So even what a difference that just made. Wow. It's amazing what layering watercolors can do. And then my transition's pretty gentle here into the bottom part, but there's no harm in just kind of going over at least this part again to make sure that it's for sure set. Okay, I'm done a little bit too low, but that's all right. Cool, looking good. I love watercolors because they all just blend together and do such pretty patterns. Oh, dreamy. Okay, well, actually, this top part is really starting to dry quickly. So in the meantime, we'll reverse plans. Sometimes watercolors grow our patience skills. So we're gonna let this set and dry down here while we move back up to the top. Mine's pretty dry. I'm gonna go back into that indigo or cobalt. I'm getting my brush pretty saturated. And again, I'm gonna continue in strips up here. This one's pretty dark. I'm just gonna paint over what I had before. Grabbing a little water to smooth some things out. Lost a little bit of my illusion of clouds, but that's okay. I know how to get them back. Okay. So again, if you have little spots that kind of show up, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfectly even. And then I'm going to take that blotter that we had before. I'm going to turn the corners, and I'm going to work those illusions of the clouds back in. So I've maintained that. So here we go. We've got a couple clouds. I'm seeing I want a little bit more over here. Great. We want to open that horizon line and that skyline by just making a really, really nice gradient. And then interrupting it with the blotting lines. Okay. So this bottom part is getting a little bit drier. Perfect. So what we're going to do, clean off this brush, get that clear in the water. And essentially what we're going to do is determine a little bit of the perspective of where we're going to come. So look at the example here. I've got some rocks kind of coming down on this side, scooping over towards the bottom border. So we're going to do something similar in ours, beginning up here, work some rocks all the way down. We are going to layer this a couple times. So if you're looking at the tones that you have and you're like, this first one, it's not dark enough, that's okay. A great thing about watercolors is layering is kind of the name of the game. So we really want to make sure this first layer determines a little bit of the space we're going to take up, and then we can always darken the pigment later. So what we're going to do is use this first coat of black to kind of say, here the rocks are, this is a space I'm going to focus on, and then we can worry about the shading later. So I'm going to turn this towards me so I can paint the way I want to, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean in just a moment. Okay, so I determined a little bit of my rock line, and then I'm just going to work this it's kind of becoming a gray pigment. It started off as black though. This black pigment into the very bottom of my paper, being sure that these edges all get filled in. And it might have a slight grayish blue tint because it might be melding really gently with that bottom border, but that's what we've got so far. So you can do a similar pattern on yours. I might reshape a couple of these rocks that I don't love too much, but not adding too much more water because otherwise it's going to bleed a little bit, and we want to make sure that we don't let it go too far. It's already feathering gently up here, so I really want to be careful that I don't let it get too much more intense on those boundaries. I'm going to keep kind of establishing this rocky edge here. Yeah, this boundary got a little bit feathered. So if that happens to you, like it just happened to me, we're all in the same boat. What I'm going to do is allow that top, very, very top part to really solidify and dry. And then later I can go back and just do a little bit of edging, and it'll get cleaned right up. So that's one of the really great things about that. I can kind of go back and dry it up with my brush if I wanted to, but I tend to find just leaving it alone is some of the best medicine for something like that. Eventually, I think I'm going to bring this rock line up a little bit. So there's that so far. Okay, so let's leave this to kind of solidify and dry. We'll go back here, do one more coat on the very top of our horizon, and then I'll show you how to start making the rocks on the actual horizon line. Clean up your brush, get that black pigment off of there. Let's go back into this cobalt territory. Hi, Mrs. Glossinger, how are you doing? I'm gonna, again, take my brush, move it across, allowing kind of darker pigment to hang out up here. For reference, for contrast, typically we do it reverse, but I did mine this way, and I really like the way that it turned out. So we'll do it this way first, and if you wanna do it a different way, you go for it. So here we are. Again, we're just gonna layer these on top of each other. If you find that you've got some brush strokes that are sitting a little bit too strongly, again, just dilute with a little bit of water. That tends to take care of it. So we're working our way down, and then grab that blotter out. You probably guessed. Actually, I'm gonna add a couple more moments, just a little bit of intensity up here, and just kind of let these feather into my boundaries. There we go. Okay. Great, so I added a little bit of just like texture of interest on the very top, a couple just splotches like this. And we're gonna grab out the blotter. Again, just gonna kind of fold it a different direction, and let's get those clouds back in there. If you need to rotate it to continue to get sort of a cleaner cloud edge, that's fine. Okay. Cool. So that's what I've got so far. We can always go back and do one more layer, but I'm pretty happy with where we are with that so far. Okay, so it's a good time to kind of just check things over, make sure nothing else has bled too far down here. The nice thing about this is that this rock line really determines the border of where this person or where the perspective is looking out towards this horizon. So you can always alter this and the background will still make sense. So that being said, let's kind of create a little bit of a boundary here on the horizon line. What you're going to want to do is be sure to clean up this brush. So get this blue off of there. And this next step can be a total hit or miss, I find, as I was preparing and practicing today. I am still learning at watercolors. I definitely consider myself a beginner. But even this much of saturation on my brush is still too much. So what I want to be sure to do is activate my color, and then wipe off as much moisture as I possibly can, because I really almost want to treat this like black ink. And what I'm going to do simply at the very, very start is just create a black line across the horizon. I tend to like to turn my paper this way and kind of blot towards myself. So if that's the easiest way you know how, that works great. Okay, so I almost need to be close to my paper here. I want to get a little bit of that moisture off there still. Keeping my brush really, really flat. I'm going to sort of inch my way on this horizon. Oh, it's already spilling. We'll cover it up in a minute, so not too big of a deal. Watercolors, they always take us for a run. Okay, so yep, I'm working these into the horizon. If it becomes sort of a, they start to feather into the top, that's okay, because we're gonna actually create a mountain line. But what I wanted to do is sort of establish where these lines kind of meet the blue ocean below. For our eye, that helps us kind of plan and prepare. Okay, so my horizon line isn't perfect, but I like it so far. I think it looks good. So we'll keep it like this. It almost looks like something's growing on the horizon there so far, but that's what I've got. I can't turn it too closely to you right now because it will, the paint will drip down my page, but that's what I have got so far. Awesome. Okay, so this is starting to dry up to the point where I think I can add the next layer of black. And since I already have black on my brush, I'm just gonna dip this back in, and I'm gonna go over a couple of these lines, starting black from the very corner, spreading outwards, because it's the corner. Wow, that's super dark. Because it's the corner, this kind of tells me it's a safe spot for the viewer to start to look. So if I start with a darker color there, I find that it helps the eye later. Okay, so again, I'm just kind of doing strokes that match similarly to the pattern that I already have established with how the rocks are going to interact with the water. Again, being sure that I'm getting to all of the borders, but not all the way to the very top. I'm leaving some of these lighter portions to be kind of the place where our eye can have an illusion of depth. And watercolors are great for that because they lend themselves really nicely to that sort of blending. Okay. Cool. So now I'm starting to do something called edging. Essentially, sounds exactly like what it is. I'm taking just a really, really little amount of paint, keeping my brush super flat, and I'm kind of rounding some of these corners. I want to be sure that they're not finite, but in a way kind of controlled. And one of the best ways I know how is to just really delicately, let me see if I can move this thing closer to you, round these corners with my brush like this. So I'm almost creating sort of a boundary for where these rocks are going to end. So this one turned out really good. I think that second one in, yeah, kind of became a little bit better understood with some of that edging. And again, this is a great time if your page feathered like mine. It's a great time to kind of just clean up some of those lines. Rocks are pretty unpredictable, so you can really get away with a lot, which is nice. But the nice thing about these is that with that edging, I can really make a nice contrast. Oh, sweet. Glad your family is doing well. I love that. Oh, it's been a long time. Okay, sweet. So again, I'm going to keep edging. I want to make sure this is dry enough that I can do that without making it feather again. And it looks like I'm good to go. So I'm going to continue just sort of making these lines a little bit more concrete. And when I do that, I'm going to drag this pigment down. So I have really sharp lines on those bottom rocks there, and these are the lines that I'm working towards up here. Okay. Now this is very top rock line is where I wanted to kind of extend a little bit of my rock and get it a little bit taller. So I'm going to do that through this edging process and slowly kind of build stilts upwards. Again, being sure to drag that pigment down so that I have a really nice overall gradient. Something really important to remember about watercolor is that it always dries lighter than what you expect. So if you anticipate your pigment being really, really opaque and dark, chances are it's going to be a little bit different, and that's totally okay. It just means that you're probably going to need to layer a little bit more than you expect. So here's what I've got so far. I've kind of built those rocks and propped them up. One line that strikes me that I need to change is right here. So I'm just gonna, and one of the great things to do when you're watercoloring is take a step back, check out how we're doing, and then go back in with that sort of attention and stillness and just kind of make a couple corrections. So I'm gonna arc this up a little bit instead. I decided I kind of wanted something a little bit more gradual. That seems to fix the problem for me. And I think I got that tall enough. I'm just going to go back over and give it a little bit more of a darker pigment. And again, dragging this all the way, being mindful of those borders, being sure they get some of that nice textured pigmented attention. And then I'm going to count this as layer number 2, and we'll come back and we'll add another one in just a couple minutes. So something I might do before we move on is again use a little bit of just like a Kleenex or something and add a couple points of interest. So I might add a couple splotches here or there to kind of show a little bit of like sunspots maybe. And I can always go back, but I'm going to add just a little bit of take a little bit of the pigment away right there. Great. So by now, this is dry enough for me to really work on the horizon line. So again, because my brush is still in the color black, I'm going to do that. I'm going to fix this one thing before I move on. Great. Activate that black again. And we're going to continue using this just like, almost like a knife, inching our way across the horizon line. Again, smoothing this out a little bit. My lines are a little bit more jagged because it was feathering last time, but it's definitely dry enough now where it's a surface I can trust. So bringing the black pigment to the party is not an issue. I love doing horizon lines like this because it reminds me of times, especially growing up, because I grew up in Minnesota on the lake. And looking over the horizon line is always so pretty. Granted, there would be way more trees and the water would not be this blue, but that's okay. So I'm going to continue to try to make this as straight as I can. Mine's pretty crooked this time, but that's okay. Sometimes things just don't go quite as how we expect, and that's totally fine. Okay, so I got mine just about straight there. Across. And again, what's super nice about having this tape is I'm not worried about what other things are surrounding or where my marks and edges end. I'm really just letting that kind of be my buffer. So I am going to start creating some mountain forms. So grab a little bit more pigment here. Again, blotting off some of the moisture. And what we are going to do, I think that's going to be, it's a little wet still. What we're going to do is make sure that brush, again, we're going to treat it like a knife. So we're blotting off as much of the moisture as we can. And then we're going to go forward. If you see on my example, I've got a couple mountains that kind of frame the horizon. What's important to notice is that I've kind of created a balanced or semi-balanced structure on the very top, along with something that's not structured on the bottom. So what's nice is that we can do a similar thing here, or I could do mountain forms that kind of complement what I have going on down here, up here, and do a larger mountain over on this side with kind of tapering off hills on this side. Why don't we try that for this example and we'll see how it goes. So we'll start with the larger mountain over here. Again, I've let my brush kind of settle in the meantime. And I'm going to start by just kind of edging up like this, keeping with straighter lines, and then we'll go back and we'll add some curve and character later.
but bringing these back down towards the horizon. And I'm just going to fill these in right now with some of the moisture that I have on my brush. So I've settled in on that mountain. I'm going to give it a little bit more groove later, but so far I think I like it. I'm going to let this one kind of, this side of the mountain really taper into the horizon line. And then we're going to create a couple other hills over here. So I'm going to let some of these little hills kind of pop up. Again, filling in the top towards the horizon. And then I'm going to just do one small complement hill on this side. Okay, so a really, really great first start to our horizon. The nice thing about this is that this is a super nice base layer, and then we can come back and add, again, a little bit more texture to our mountains to create the illusion of a little bit more depth on the horizon line. But I think it's a really great start so far. We're gonna go back over here, add a little bit more darkness to add some variety and some interest onto the rocks that are closest to our viewer. Again, taking back into the black, working from the corner, and this is pretty dark paint, so we'll see how it decides to behave here. I'm going to leave a couple of those areas that I blotted without some paint so that I have a little bit more visual interest. And then as we work our way over, being sure again to taper our brush strokes so that we for sure get all of the boundaries near the tape lines. Cool. Well, I think we're looking really good over here. I want to go to this beach. This kind of sounds fun. Okay. All right. Fixing one line that's bugging me. The nice thing about working in layers, you can kind of round things out as you go. You don't have to commit to any forms until a little bit down the way, which is nice. Okay. Watercolor is a sport of patience, I think. So here we are, we've got those rocks in the front, and you can see where I've left some of those lighter patches on the front or on the top of these rocks. I'm going to use my blotter and again, just blot a couple more spots, nothing too dramatic, nothing too wild or big, but I am going to add up just a couple more. Okay, great. So this is going to be awesome because it does some of the shading for me. And by now, some of the pigment has settled on the horizon, so I can come back and again kind of tweak some of those lines. So keep this paint in that dark black ink. And my biggest concern right now is just making sure this mountain makes sense. So grab a little bit more black watercolor there. Again, trying to get as much moisture off my brush so I can use a little bit more like ink, or if you are somebody who loves pens, India ink is really great. I was trying to get to bring that with me to Spain, but it didn't make it in my bag. I was worried it would explode, and that would be a mess. So decided it was better safe than sorry, but hopefully I can track some down in the next couple weeks when we're out of quarantine, maybe. Great. So again, just going to fix a couple of these lines. What I like to do is just come really close to the paper. As you can see, I'm like face to face with the paper, and let my brush sort of kind of find the wiggles and grooves of the paper and let those kind of create really natural lines on the side of the mountains that we have. I think you'll find it looks a lot more realistic and just a little bit less like cookie cutter, which is nice. Okay. I don't know where you are today, but it's pretty gloomy here in Spain. We got some new restrictions for the quarantine, so maybe it's fitting, I'm not sure. But it's a little sad, so I figured why not wear bubblegum pink to kind of cheer everything up. Who knows? Could be great. Okay, again, a reminder to bring that dark pigment down towards the horizon line. And that's what the mountain looks like now. Pretty nice. I like it. I almost want to make this guy just a little bit taller. changing his profile just a little bit. Yeah, that feels better. Okay, great. So we're gonna go back. You got it. Back to this corner, add a little bit more, a little bit darker watercolor. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of spot it a little bit and add a couple points of where paint is gonna gather, but really I'm not gonna do a full coat. I'm just gonna build on some of the surfaces that are already darker and add a little bit more just variety. I think when it dries, you'll be able to tell where some of the windows where you might need to go back in and patch it up. But really by now you've probably got at least a couple, 3 or 4 good layers in that you don't need to worry too much. Okay. And take a little bit of that off there. Give a little bit just more water to kind of let this be a little bit more gentle, some of those lines. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think we're looking really good here. So we've only got a couple important things left. We've really solidified the top of our painting. This bottom rock portion is drying. Again, I'm going to use my blotter just to add a couple more spots. That was maybe a little bit too much. We'll let some of the water run there. Great. So here we are. This is what we're looking like from far back. And we have a couple other just little things that make the scene that we'll add in. I'm seeing one more spot I want to blot because I'm picky. And yeah, okay. So great. Oh yeah, that's what it needed. You never know. Okay, so what we're gonna do is if you have a Q-tip on you, and I just thought of this before I logged on, I didn't get to add an update to the list. So if you have to run around your house, you can blame me. So if you have a Q-tip or something at home that is circular that you could kind of use as a stamp, I like Q-tips because they're so small. We're gonna use that to kind of help create some of our skyline. I need to fix that little blurb, that's gonna bug me. We'll do that by grabbing out some of the lighter watercolors here. Again, while I fix some of the rocks, there we go. It's the problem with watercolors, you could blot all day long. Okay, so what we're gonna do is dip this top into water again, and just blot this on the yellow watercolor. You don't need a ton. And then I dip it into water one more time, kind of saturate the paint a little bit more. I like to kind of twirl it. And I'm going to pick a point in my horizon line that's really dry, first of all. Second, where it looks like I can kind of nestle in a sun. Now, here, based on where our drawing is, I can think of a couple places that would be nice. I mean, I could do it in the center up here, but I also kind of like the idea of tucking it into the mountains somewhere. So I might tuck it, let's see. I kind of wanted to go right there, right in here by this mountain to kind of offset the interest from this side of the paper as I move up the paper to kind of go to the other side. So I'm going to take the pigment that I have and I am quite simply just going to blot like this. Like that. I'm going to let that dry for just a second because there isn't a ton of water on here. It's really going to dry pretty quick and almost might beat our rock formations over here. And I'm going to add, again, just a little bit more pigment on there. I find blowing it off a little bit can help. Great. I'm going to blot it again. Give it just a little bit more of a brighter yellow. You can't see it on here. But I got my little yellow sunshine right there. And then I like to add a little bit of 3-dimensionality to it. So I'm gonna just use my blotter and blot into the orange, which is I'm doing everything I tell you not to do in art class, but it's a must. And then I'm just gonna simply add a little bit more of kind of an orangey hazy sun on top. Maybe got a little bit darker than I wanted, but that's okay. Add a little bit more yellow. Okay. All right. Cool. So I'm going to let that sun set for, oh,
sounds like a pun. That sun sort of solidify those colors there for just a moment. And we'll talk about a couple of the components that are working really well in our drawing so far. First off, we've got this gradient on top that's really working. We've got these kind of illusion of some clouds, but nothing too defined. And then a really sharp exit from the sky into this beautiful blue abyss, and then we've cut into it with some really dynamic, awesome rocks at the bottom to kind of create an environment and a lens for our piece. What's working really well about sort of this transition is that we know that the water fades out, but we don't necessarily all need to see it. Our eyes understand based on the way that we've drawn these rocks to kind of frame our scene. So what I am going to do is add a little bit of white paint to this very top here. I'm going to clean off this brush really well, especially because we were just drawing with black. And we'll add a little bit of white watercolor if you have it, again onto these top clouds to sort of make a more of a milky effect. And I think we're just about there. Okay, so here we are going to activate that white. Don't need a ton of water because I really want this to be pigment heavy. And I'm just going to slowly blot it in some gentle kind of wave formations. If it picks up on some of the pigment, that's totally fine. And then we'll slowly kind of work it across the page. If you need to add a little bit more water, feel free to do that. I think you'll find that it just kind of brings a couple of these ideas together here on the horizon. Like that. Yeah. Who knew you could paint with white? Amazing. At least on paper. On walls, we do it all the time. Okay. Looking really good. And again, it's nice because I can kind of frame where the sun is on my page. We'll see you later. Have a great day. And here we go. Here is our finished watercolor drawing. I'll post it when, I'll post a picture when I can lift it up and not drag pigment all over the place. But I'm just gonna correct that last little part there. Great. But you did a great job. I hope yours is looking awesome. I'm sure it is. Here is our watercolor sort of landscape and sunset. You can feel free to add other mountains if you wanted to with a lighter gray on top or even echoing some of those lines behind. But the only other option I can think of that we can't do at this point in time would be adding a couple birds over here, which is what I have in my sample. Just to kind of create more of that ocean scene. And you are all set. Take the tape off, give it a signature, and you're all good to go. I've got something to read to you before we go. And as you're finishing those last touches, I pray that this washes over you. This is from Psalm 89. I will sing of the steadfast love of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known your faithfulness to all generations. For I said, steadfast love will be built up forever. In the heavens you will establish your faithfulness. Isn't that true? Even getting to draw some of the skies, I'm like, man, God does the best job at this. You have said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I've sworn to David my servant, I will establish your offspring forever and build your throne for all generations. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord, a God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him? O Lord God of hosts, who is mighty as you are, O Lord, with your faithfulness all around you? You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. I love that. Especially because our scene is something so tropical and oceanic. It's a gift to get to paint some of God's creation and get to be creative along with him. So I pray for you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a gift to paint and create ideas with you. Let's pray. God, thanks so much that you're good. Thanks that you're the master painter and you do it all the time with this world. We are amazed at your goodness in it. Lord, we pray a blessing over this day. I pray a blessing over the people who've been watching and painting along with me. Pray that you would go before them, giving them your kindness and goodness in the day. Lord, we love you. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me again. If you enjoyed this time and want to share it with somebody, please feel free to do that. And if not, post a picture and let me know how you did. I'd love to see some of your paintings. So again, I'm Meg. Thanks so much for joining us. Quarantine day 15. You did it. Self high five. Have a wonderful afternoon if you're in Spain and a wonderful day if you're in the States. Bye.